When your dog goes silent, this is what it really means. You know that moment when your usually chatty, tail-wagging companion suddenly becomes quiet? Well, I'm about to reveal something that will completely change how you see your dog's silence. We're going to uncover a hidden truth that affects over half of all dogs worldwide. Something so subtle that even experienced veterinarians often miss it. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what your dog's silence is really trying to tell you. And trust me, it's not what you think. If you enjoy fascinating insights like this and want to see more, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. The silence that speaks louder than barks. Picture this. Luna, a beautiful 8-year-old golden retriever, used to be the neighborhood's unofficial greeting committee. Every morning she'd bark with pure joy when her family woke up, announce every delivery truck with enthusiastic woofs, and practically sing opera when her favorite humans came home from work. But then, something changed. It started subtly. Her morning barks became softer, then less frequent. The delivery truck announcements turned into quiet glances toward the door, and those joyful homecoming serenades, they simply stopped. Luna's family initially celebrated. Finally, they thought, our dog is becoming more mature and well-behaved. Sound familiar? Have you ever caught yourself thinking the same thing about your own dog's newfound quiet demeanor? Drop a comment below and let me know. I read and respond to every single one. Here's the shocking reality that Luna's family and millions of dog owners worldwide didn't realize. Up to 53% of dogs that appear perfectly healthy are actually suffering in silence. This isn't just a statistic I'm throwing around to grab your attention. This comes from groundbreaking veterinary research that's revolutionizing how we understand our canine companions. But before we dive deeper into Luna's story, let me ask you something. When you think about dog communication, what comes to mind? Barking, right? Maybe some tail wagging, a few whines here and there. Well, prepare to have your mind blown, because that's barely scratching the surface of how your dog is actually talking to you. The truth is, dogs are having conversations with us every single moment of every day. They're master communicators, constantly sending us messages through a sophisticated language that doesn't rely on sound at all. In fact, the vast majority of canine communication happens in complete silence, through subtle body language cues that most of us walk right past without noticing. Think about it this way. Humans are listeners, but dogs are watchers. While we've evolved to communicate primarily through words and sounds, dogs have developed an incredibly complex system of visual signals, postures, and micro-expressions. They're reading us like an open book every second, picking up on our mood, our stress levels, even our intentions, all without us saying a single word. So when a dog suddenly becomes quiet, they're not just changing their vocal habits, they're fundamentally altering their entire communication strategy. And that shift? It's always trying to tell us something important. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, but my dog has always been quiet. Some breeds are just naturally less vocal, right? And you're absolutely correct. There are definitely dogs who are naturally more reserved, breeds that prefer subtle communication over dramatic announcements. Basenji dogs, for example, are famously known as barkless dogs, though they make other fascinating sounds. But here's the critical distinction we need to make. There's a huge difference between a naturally quiet dog and a dog who has become quiet. The change is what matters. It's like the difference between a person who's naturally introverted versus someone who suddenly stops talking after years of being chatty. Let me share 3 types of canine silence that every dog owner needs to understand. First, there's natural silence. Dogs who are simply less vocal by temperament or breed characteristics. These dogs have consistent communication patterns throughout their lives. Second, we have situational silence, temporary quiet periods caused by environmental changes, new routines, or short-term stress. Maybe you moved to a new house, got a new job with different hours, or welcomed a new family member. These dogs usually return to their normal communication patterns once they adjust. But then there's the third type, and this is where Luna's story becomes crucial. Concerning silence. This is when a previously vocal or normally communicative dog gradually or suddenly becomes withdrawn, less responsive, or stops engaging in their usual social behaviors. The scary part? This type of silence often gets praised rather than investigated. We live in a world where quiet dogs are often seen as good dogs, where we celebrate when our pets stop bothering us with their vocalizations. But what if I told you that silence might actually be your dog's way of crying for help? Luna's family learned this the hard way. For months, they enjoyed their peaceful mornings and quiet evenings, assuming their beloved Golden was simply maturing. They had no idea that Luna was actually developing a condition that affects millions of dogs worldwide, a condition so subtle, so perfectly hidden, that it's virtually invisible to the naked eye. The most heartbreaking part? Luna was trying to tell them something was wrong the entire time. Every quiet morning, every missed greeting, every gentle withdrawal from family activities was actually a carefully crafted message in the ancient language that dogs have been using to communicate with humans for thousands of years. But here's what her family didn't know, and what most dog owners never discover. There's a type of suffering that affects more than half of all dogs. Something that can hide behind perfectly normal behavior, disguise itself as simple aging, and remain completely undetectable by standard veterinary examinations. It's a condition that can make the most loving, communicative dogs retreat into silence, not because they want to, but because they literally cannot find any other way to cope. When love means silence. What if I told you that your dog's love for you might actually be the reason they're suffering in silence? It sounds impossible, right? But here's what veterinary science has discovered. Dogs have evolved over thousands of years to hide their pain so effectively that even the most advanced medical equipment can't detect it. Think about Luna again. While her family was celebrating their well-behaved dog, Luna was actually demonstrating one of the most sophisticated survival mechanisms in the animal kingdom. You see, in the wild, showing pain or weakness is essentially signing your own death certificate. Predators target the vulnerable, the injured, the ones who can't keep up with the pack. But here's the heartbreaking irony. Our domestic dogs still carry these ancient survival instincts, even though they're sleeping on our sofas and eating from personalized food bowls. Their wild ancestors' voices are still whispering, "Hide the pain, stay strong, or you won't survive." And they've gotten incredibly good at it. Let me share something that will probably shock you. Traditional veterinary diagnostics, X-rays, ultrasounds, MRI scans, CT scans, blood tests, can completely miss what veterinarians now call silent pain. This isn't because our veterinarians aren't skilled or because the technology isn't advanced. It's because this type of pain literally doesn't show up on conventional medical imaging. We're talking about soft tissue pain, chronic inflammation, early-stage arthritis, and muscular discomfort that exists in the spaces between what our medical instruments can see. It's like trying to photograph a whisper or X-ray an emotion. Dr. Edward Bassingthwaite, a veterinarian who specializes in this field, describes it perfectly. This pain is invisible to their humans precisely because it builds up slowly over time. There are no dramatic limping episodes, no obvious crying, no clear something is wrong moments that send us rushing to the emergency vet. Instead, what we see are subtle changes that we often interpret as normal aging or maturity. Does this sound familiar? Your dog used to bound up the stairs but now takes them more slowly. They used to play fetch for hours but now seem content with shorter sessions. They used to greet you at the door with full-body excitement, but now offer a gentler welcome. We tell ourselves, well, they're getting older, or they're finally calming down. But what if those aren't signs of aging or maturity? What if they're actually your dog's sophisticated way of managing pain that they can't tell you about? Here's where it gets even more complex. Dogs experiencing chronic pain often continue doing the things they love, chasing balls, going on walks, playing with their favorite toys. This happens because physical activity releases endorphins, those natural, feel-good chemicals that temporarily mask pain sensations. So your dog might still run to catch that frisbee, not because they're pain-free, but because the joy and endorphin rush from playing with you actually provides temporary relief. It's like a person with a headache who forgets about their pain while watching an exciting movie, only to remember it again when the credits roll. This creates what veterinarians call the exercise paradox. The very activities that bring our dogs joy might also be covering up the signals we need to recognize their discomfort. Let me tell you about some of the most common conditions that cause silent pain. Arthritis doesn't just appear overnight in senior dogs. It can begin developing in dogs as young as 1 year old, progressing so gradually that both dogs and owners adapt without realizing what's happening. Dental disease is another major culprit. Dogs can develop painful periodontal disease, tooth infections, or oral tumors while still eating normally. They've learned to chew on one side of their mouth, swallow food differently, or simply tolerate the discomfort because the alternative, not eating, isn't an option their survival instincts will allow. Ear infections, bladder infections, and other internal inflammations can cause constant, low-level pain that dogs simply incorporate into their daily experience. Imagine having a persistent headache or toothache but not being able to tell anyone about it. You'd probably become quieter too, conserving energy and trying to manage the discomfort as best you could. Here's what's particularly heartbreaking. Recent research has shown a strong connection between noise sensitivity and musculoskeletal pain in dogs. Dogs who suddenly become fearful of thunderstorms, fireworks, or loud noises might not just be developing anxiety. They might be experiencing physical pain that makes them more sensitive to environmental stressors. The research shows that dogs with undiagnosed pain often develop what appears to be behavioral problems: increased fearfulness, reduced social interaction, changes in sleep patterns, and yes, decreased vocalization. But here's something that might give you hope. Luna's story has a turning point. Her family finally noticed something that made them take action. It wasn't dramatic, no limping, no crying, no obvious emergency. Instead, it was her breathing. Luna had started panting slightly more than usual, even when she wasn't hot or hadn't been exercising. Her family almost dismissed it, but something made them mention it during a routine vet visit. That small observation led to a discovery that changed everything. The veterinarian, trained to recognize signs of silent pain, conducted a hands-on examination that revealed significant muscle tension and inflammation in Luna's shoulders and hips, areas that had been aching for months, possibly years. Luna hadn't stopped greeting her family because she'd become less loving. She'd stopped because lifting her head high and jumping up had become uncomfortable. She hadn't stopped barking at the mailman because she'd become less protective. She'd stopped because the physical act of barking required muscle engagement that caused her pain. Every behavior change had been her way of saying, "I'm hurting, but I love you too much to burden you with it." The most incredible part? Within weeks of appropriate treatment, Luna began returning to her old self. The morning greetings came back, gentler but genuine. The protective barks returned, though more measured. She started asking for walks again, playing with her favorite toys. But Luna's case revealed something even more important. Something that every single dog owner needs to understand about the emotional side of canine silence. Because physical pain isn't the only thing that can steal your dog's voice. The emotional language of dog silence. What if I told you that your dog's heart can break just like yours can, and when it does, silence becomes their only language? While we've been talking about physical pain, there's another type of suffering that's even more common, affects dogs of all ages, and has everything to do with their emotional well-being. Let me introduce you to Max, a 3-year-old border collie mix who went from being a chatty, interactive companion to almost completely silent in the span of just 2 weeks. No physical injury, no obvious illness, no dramatic incident. Just silence. Max's transformation began when his family welcomed a new baby. At first, everything seemed fine. Max was curious about the little human, gentle and protective. But as days turned into weeks, his family noticed he was barking less, seeking attention less, and spending more time alone in his favorite corner. Finally, they thought, Max is learning to be quieter with the baby around. But what they didn't realize was that Max was experiencing something that veterinary behaviorists now recognize as one of the most common causes of behavioral changes in dogs: emotional stress that manifests as what we call behavioral shutdown. Here's what's fascinating and heartbreaking at the same time. Dogs experience stress and anxiety very much like we do. Their bodies produce the same stress hormone, cortisol. And when cortisol levels remain elevated for extended periods, it literally changes how their brains function. But unlike humans, who might talk about their feelings, call a friend, or seek help, dogs have limited options for processing emotional distress. And for many dogs, especially those with sensitive temperaments, silence becomes their coping mechanism. Think about it from their perspective. Imagine you're in a situation where you feel uncertain, anxious or overwhelmed, but you can't verbally express what you're experiencing. What might you do? You might withdraw, become quieter, observe more, and participate less. That's exactly what emotionally stressed dogs do. Let me share some of the most common emotional triggers that can cause dogs to retreat into silence. Environmental changes are huge. Moving to a new home, changes in family routine, new work schedules that alter when family members are present. All of these can create uncertainty in your dog's world. Dogs thrive on predictability, and when their familiar patterns get disrupted, some respond by becoming more reserved while they try to figure out the new normal. Family dynamic shifts can be particularly challenging. The arrival of a new baby, like in Max's case, or a new pet, or even a new romantic partner, can make dogs feel like they need to reassess their place in the family hierarchy. Sometimes they become quieter because they're trying to be good and not cause problems during times of change. Loss and grief affect dogs more profoundly than many people realize. When a beloved family member dies, moves away, or when a companion animal passes away, dogs can experience genuine grief. They might become less vocal, less playful, and more withdrawn as they process the absence of someone important to them. But here's something that might surprise you. Sometimes training methods themselves can cause dogs to become silent. When dogs are trained using punishment-based methods, constant corrections, yelling, or intimidation techniques, they often learn that it's safer to offer no behavior at all rather than risk doing something wrong. Veterinary behaviorists call this learned helplessness. The dog essentially decides that since they can't predict what will make their humans happy or upset, the safest strategy is to do as little as possible. They stop barking, stop greeting enthusiastically, stop offering playful behaviors because they've learned that any action might result in correction. This breaks my heart because these dogs haven't become well-behaved. They've become emotionally suppressed. Their silence isn't peace, it's anxiety. Now, how can you tell if your dog's silence is emotional rather than physical? Here are some key signs that veterinary behaviorists have identified. Emotional stress often comes with what we call calming signals or appeasement behaviors. Your dog might start yawning more frequently when they're not tired, licking their lips when they're not hungry, or looking away from you when you're trying to interact with them. These aren't signs of disrespect. They're your dog's way of saying, "I'm feeling overwhelmed and I'm trying to calm myself down." You might notice changes in their sleep patterns. Stressed dogs often sleep more as a way of escaping emotional discomfort, but their sleep might be more restless, with more shifting positions or startling awake. Appetite changes are common too. Some emotionally stressed dogs eat less, while others might actually eat more as a comfort behavior. The key is noticing changes from their normal patterns. Social withdrawal is another major sign. If your normally social dog starts avoiding family activities, doesn't come when called with their usual enthusiasm, or seeks out quiet, isolated spots in the house, they might be processing emotional stress. Here's what's really important to understand. Emotional silence in dogs isn't permanent, and it's definitely not a character flaw. Dogs are incredibly resilient, and with the right support, they can rediscover their voice and their confidence. Max's story has a beautiful ending. His family, once they understood what was happening, made some simple but crucial changes. They ensured Max still had one-on-one time, maintained his familiar routines as much as possible, and gave him a quiet space where he could retreat when the household felt overwhelming. Most importantly, they stopped praising his silence and instead gently encouraged his natural behaviors. When he did bark or seek attention, they responded positively, showing him that his communication was still valued and welcome. Within a few weeks, Max began emerging from his emotional cocoon. His bark returned gradually, his playfulness resumed, and his confidence rebuilt itself day by day. But here's what Max's family learned that changed everything for them. Understanding the difference between normal, quiet behavior and concerning silence isn't just about knowing what to look for. It's about knowing exactly when to take action and what questions to ask. Becoming your dog's voice. So here we are. You now know that your dog's silence might be hiding physical pain, emotional distress, or both. But the most important question remains: how do you become the detective your dog needs? How do you decode those silent messages and know exactly when your furry family member is asking for help? Let me give you something invaluable. A practical guide that veterinary behaviorists use to assess dogs, adapted for loving pet parents like you. Think of this as becoming fluent in your dog's secret language. First, let's talk about the power of observation. Professional animal behaviorists follow what they call the observe first, interpret later method. This means writing down exactly what you see before you try to explain what it means. Grab a notebook, yes, literally, and for the next week, spend just 5 minutes each day recording your dog's behavior. Not your interpretation of it, just the facts. Dog walked a food bowl, sniffed, walked away. Not dog wasn't hungry. See the difference? This systematic approach helps you spot patterns that you might miss when you're just casually observing. You might discover that your dog only shows certain behaviors at specific times of day, in particular locations, or around certain family members. Now, let me share the warning signs that should prompt immediate veterinary attention. I call this the 24-48 hour rule. If you notice any combination of these signs persisting for more than a day or two, it's time to make that phone call. Physical red flags include changes in breathing patterns, panting when it's not hot, shallow breathing, or breathing that seems effortful. Changes in posture are crucial too. Watch for the prayer position, where dogs put their front legs down and rear end up. This often indicates abdominal discomfort. Look for stiffness when getting up, reluctance to climb stairs, or subtle limping that comes and goes. Behavioral red flags are equally important. Sudden changes in appetite, either eating much less or suddenly eating much more. Changes in sleep patterns, especially sleeping significantly more than usual during daytime hours. Social withdrawal, not greeting you at the door, avoiding family activities they usually enjoy, or seeking out isolated spots in the house. But here's something crucial. Context is everything. A dog who becomes quiet during a thunderstorm is very different from a dog who becomes quiet for no apparent reason. A dog who's less vocal after a recent move is different from a dog whose silence appears suddenly in their familiar environment. Let me tell you about the success stories. Real dogs whose families became their advocates by learning this language. Remember Luna? Her family's breakthrough came when they started documenting her breathing patterns. They noticed it was most pronounced in the mornings and after lying down for extended periods. This information helped their veterinarian diagnose early-stage arthritis and begin treatment that transformed Luna's quality of life. Max's family discovered his emotional triggers by tracking when his withdrawal behaviors were strongest. They realized it always coincided with disruptions to his routine, loud household activities, multiple visitors, or changes in the baby's sleep schedule. Armed with this knowledge, they could proactively create calm spaces for Max during potentially stressful times. Here's what modern veterinary medicine can do for silent pain. Laser therapy, which uses focused light energy to reduce inflammation and promote healing in soft tissues. Physical therapy for dogs, including exercises and stretches that can dramatically improve mobility and comfort. Advanced pain medications that are specifically formulated for dogs, much safer and more effective than anything we had even 10 years ago. For emotional silence, certified animal behaviorists can work with you to identify triggers and develop customized behavior modification plans. The key is finding professionals who use positive, science-based methods rather than outdated, dominance-based approaches. But here's something you can start doing right now. Become your dog's advocate. When you visit your veterinarian, don't just say, "He seems quieter lately." Instead, share your observations. Over the past 3 weeks, I've noticed he greets us at the door only about half as often as he used to, and when he does, he doesn't lift his head as high. He's also sleeping about 2 hours more per day than his usual pattern. Specific observations give veterinarians the crucial information they need to look in the right places for potential problems. Create what I call a communication-friendly environment at home. This means having consistent routines that help your dog feel secure, designated quiet spaces where they can retreat when needed, and positive responses when your dog does communicate, even if it's not at the most convenient times. Remember, every single behavior change is your dog trying to tell you something. They might be saying, "I'm in pain," or "I'm anxious," or sometimes simply, "I'm getting older, and I need you to adjust our activities to match my changing needs." The most beautiful part of Luna and Max's stories isn't just that they recovered. It's that their relationships with their families became even stronger. When you learn to truly hear your dog's silent language, you develop a connection that goes beyond words, beyond barks, beyond any vocal communication. You become partners in a conversation that's been happening all along. You just needed to learn how to listen with your eyes and your heart instead of just your ears. Your dog has been talking to you every single day of their life. Their silence isn't the absence of communication. It's simply a different language, one that requires you to pay attention in new ways. The question isn't whether your dog is communicating with you. The question is, are you ready to hear what they're really saying? If this video has opened your eyes to the incredible world of canine communication, make sure you're subscribed because understanding our dogs is a journey and there's so much more to discover together.